Welcome to the enLIGHTenUP podcast. I am your host, Nicole Frolick, and I invite you to cozy up with me each week as I explore all aspects of the spiritual journey, spiritual biohacking, and expanding the mind beyond this reality. Remember that the collective awakening can start by planting one seed, so thanks for being such an amazing audience and sharing these shows with your family and friends. So without further ado, let's jump right into the episode and find out what we're discovering today. Hey guys, how are you all? Of course, as you all know, I've been having tech issues getting my scheduled video to go live. And so I know that some of you were in the other live chat. So I hope you're making your way over to this way. I have a really great show lined up for you guys today. As you can see, I have a new guest, Mason Feary, who is a former Geospatial Intelligence Analyst for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and the U.S. Army. And he served 6 years in the uniformed services and 3 years as a civilian with the NGA. During 2017, after being approached by high-level occultists in the District of Colombia, Mason began to see a new world, one hidden from the majority of the population, one where elites run the world in every facet of society and the darkest of arenas. Upon his awakening, he began to expand his awareness by healing the mother and father wounds and many other childhood traumas. Being curious about the occult and other forms of hidden or lost information, he dedicated his life to discovering the knowledge hidden from humankind by using his abilities given to him through his past profession of intelligence collection. His goal or mission is to help those create new and powerful imagery in mind to expand past former constraints within the human consciousness. He can penetrate the veil of illusion with his Arcturain star family's help, teaching him many new forms of mental and emotional communication with those around him and teaching these methods to others. Mason, in numerology terms, is a life path 11, and unlike his other counterparts with this number, he serves the divine creator. Many with this number are tested in ways the matrix has been designed for, offering power, money, and fame, to list a few. Mason has always been guided by his inner light and is now ready to help share these lights with the world and these gifts. Mason, welcome. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm so happy that we're finally getting to do this. And I see some guys are in the chat here. Thanks so much. Derek, can you just maybe, if you need to, let everyone else in that other chat know that this started? I'm sure you guys know, but thanks so much. Mason, you were in Sedona with me last weekend.
Yes, it was.
How did you find Sedona?
So through Trisha, actually.
No, I mean, like, how did you find the whole trip?
Oh, okay. It was interesting. I mean, there was definitely some difference in people's energies. There's like a more spiritual focused group, and then the more kind of mainstream, what's going on in the Matrix group. I kind of melded with both, but I liked our table that we had the last couple nights. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we got into some good conversations there. That was really nice. And I love where we're taking things. And of course, I got to know you a little bit better, and you've got an incredible story that I think a lot of people are going to benefit here today, because you know, it's interesting. In my alchemy group, they've been talking about portals and opening and closing them. So we'll get into a little bit about that. And of course, ET contact is always of interest because so many of us have our galactic heritage coming online more these days. Well, why don't you just give us a quick rundown on what exactly happened while you were working at the agency, and what happened after you rejected their proposal?
Well, it was a combination of my own choices and then the universe saying, hey, you're too far in the wrong polarity. So basically, I was going after a pursuit of a career that, you know, I thought I wanted. It was military. It was very technically advanced because I love working with computers. And as I started, you know, climbing up these ropes, I was making 6 figures a year, which was quite amazing for how young I was. I was like 25. But I still had a lot of like residual issues that manifested into like anger or like egotism, you know, stuff like that. And as I was getting approached by these people, my life literally started taking a dive. And for the longest time, I put all the blame on them, like, oh, they were messing with me. Well, if they were, since I believed it, it was me messing with my own path. But they do actually can interfere with your trajectory and kind of take some stuff like removing my clearance and losing all my personal belongings and going homeless. That was definitely one of the starters to this journey. But upon trying to pick myself back up, I moved back home to Washington State, and then I started just walking in nature. I just was guided to walk in nature. I was guided to kind of do a reset, let all of what I was feeling, just let it go into the forest, in the trails. And after by doing that for about 2 years, I actually reset my entire being. And learning through the stillness of nature, I was able to figure out what was my true desires and what was not. And that was a profound discovery in my own journey.
You know, the idea of walking through nature and allowing nature to show you all of the answers of the universe is a pretty profound thing to do. Not a lot of us take the time to do that. And of course, you were in a kind of a forced position where you didn't really have another option.
Nope, it was definitely forced. I actually ended up dying due to like my own personal choices and drinking one night. And then I kept continuing to do it until one day, like, well, they took my entire livelihood, or what I thought was my livelihood, away. And it was definitely a forceful or gentle nudge into the right direction. And then I took it, it resonated, and I've never felt energetically or mentally better in my entire life than I am right now.
What was it about the proposal that you really didn't want to partake in, that like you knew was not for you?
So
Because I mean, if you're making a lot of money, most people would be very curious to go down that route.
Yeah, and they promise more money is the weird thing. They promise more money, they promise positions of power, and they promise they want it. They would say anything that was a promise, get it in writing. And I was like, this is so weird. Like, these people are just employees, so I thought, but they have their hands so deep throughout the facets of these intelligence agencies that they actually run things. And that's where this blackmail comes into play and all that. But when I was about 23, I was approached by a Freemason originally. This was in the Army. And maybe I had been one in a past life, because I shook this dude's hand and I did their little weird thing, but I didn't know it. I just shook his hand and he gave me a riddle. And I was like looking at him like, what? It was like something to do with the sun and the moon and my mom's birthday. And I was like thrown off. And he's like, oh, I thought you were a member. I thought you were a Mason. I was like, no, my name's Mason. and so that was my first iteration. And then he told me, he's like, hey, I want you to go down to the temple that's in your hometown and go say hi and speak to so-and-so. And so I went to go knock on the door. And then in my mind, I heard, go to the back. And I was like, that is so strange. So I actually went to the back. And then I went to go knock on the back door and it said, go back to the front. And I said, okay, whatever's going on, this is weird. I'm done. And I texted him back, like, I can't do it. And he goes, they won't make you do anything you don't want to. And I was like, that was weird enough for me. So that was the first thing. The second one was when I was in the intelligence agency, these guys would basically be like, hey, come down to lunch. Come, we want to talk to you. We want to see what you're about. And they would message me on my work computer. And ever so often I wouldn't mess with them because I just had that weird feeling from the previous encounter. And then they kept messaging me, and I'd see a couple of them because you can tell who they are. They have those huge rings. A lot of the rings do different purposes depending on what degree they are. But around the whole scenario, this is 2017, so the pot was just beginning to stir. So things with the Trump administration coming into play, Obama was freaking out, and the intelligence agencies, they didn't want you to talk about any of it, which is weird because like that's your boss. So I started speaking out about Trump and how I was pro-Trump, and I got a lot of backlash. And then one day, this guy came up to me. He's like, so why don't you want to join the Masons? And I said, well, I don't want to join a cult, wear robes and, touch little boys. Now, at that time, I didn't know there was any truth to that. I just thought like, hey, these are just a weird group of people that have power within their club. Not until after I lost my position, 3 days after that statement, and some other digging, did I find that, in fact, these people do that and much more when it comes to just all sorts of things in the world of alchemy or transfiguration, basically.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So were you, when you found out that they kind of took away your life, so to speak, like what you originally thought was your life, what did your stuff get locked up in storage or?
Well, it was a combination of me like being very allowed about my opinion of them, and pretty much to anybody because I had a pretty big mouth. What happened was they took my clearance, and I had that clearance for about a decade. And I tried to get it reinstated, but whoever held the clearance was above a branch chief level to give me that clearance back from DSS. I actually made the connections to figure that out. So I had to get out of my apartment, put all my stuff in storage. And then in about a month, I wasn't able to make the payments. So they sold it, and they sold my personal identity. So they sold, and I messaged the CEO of that location. I was like, hey, can I have this one folder? It has my Army credentials. It has my social security, it has my birth certificate, it has my entire life. Can I have it? And then they blocked me. And I wasn't able to contact anyone in there. And so
my gosh.
Yeah, I lost my entire identity. And then I was homeless.
Talk about an ego death.
Yeah. Lost all my memories of my personal belongings, pictures. I used to carry a box that I kept memorable things like notes or pictures in. That one I think hurt the most out of all the material things.
Yeah, the sentimental stuff that holds meaning and value from that sense. So that's pretty incredible. And were you scared at all during that time, like the initial stages? Were you afraid that you might be hurt or anything like that?
No, I wasn't afraid of being hurt. So I was on pharmaceuticals that helped me get bigger, right, athletically. So all the other emotions that I could have experienced did not exist. The only one that did was anger.
Oh.
Yeah, I channeled it all into anger. And I channeled it into just working out. Like that's all I did was work out. But then the universe caught wind of that and made it so I couldn't afford food. So that went out the window. And eventually, if people don't know what those do, they mess with your hormones on a very massive level. I actually had to go cold turkey after being on it for 6 years, which created an entire hormonal imbalance. And inadvertently, not on purpose, I was fasted for about 15 days, and that actually helped reset everything.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then just because I couldn't afford food. But during that fasting is when new things started to come around, and I started looking at people a little bit differently, because in my trajectory of this timeline, something kind of clicked. It was like this event happened, and then losing my possessions, and then fasting. At the end of that fast is when I started going, something's not right here. Something's a little bit different. And this is still in DC, which was surrounded by all sorts of darkness. But I started to tap into, my mom was into Reiki. And so she started talking about that. She's like, okay, start communicating with your higher self. And I'm like, this is some, like, what? Well, I started doing it, and I started getting little messages, but they were very distorted because I just had so much rage inside of me. And then I just kept going with it and kept listening. And then eventually the tipping point was when I couldn't get back into that industry. They basically said, like, hey, we don't want you to contact the NG anymore. We don't want you to try to pursue a career in this. And then some of my friends in the industry were like, yeah, dude, you're done. It's over. So when that really solidified, that's when I kind of started going really dark. And I started going, well, man, if I can't do what I thought my dream was, why am I here? And that's when the suicidal thoughts started coming in. And I mean, really bad, really, really bad. So much so that I actually had to fight with those thoughts on a daily basis. And a lot of people would be like, oh, that's not so bad. But I lost everything I owned within a matter of.
You had nothing to hold on to.
Yeah.
You had nothing to anchor you. Yeah, that's really tough. And it's interesting because the universe and our soul contracts that we create, before we come into this lifetime, are so interesting how we'll orchestrate much of this with the universe to what looks like the most dire situation ever, but really it's protection for you to guide you down the path that you were intending to go.
Absolutely.
And that's a really hard concept to grasp, though, when you're in such a lower emotional state, when you're probably battling depression.
Mm.
And of course, with your hormones resettling, though, I'm curious, what sort of things started to come into your awareness when your hormones started to balance out versus when you were doing the
On
other stuff?
Yeah, well, so what first happened was my testosterone completely depleted, and then estrogen started to kick in. And what a lot of people don't know is if you have a higher level of estrogen in the body, in a male body, suicide is one of the side effects. It's an instability of connecting logic thoughts with your emotional body. And so not only was I trying to fight that, but I was trying to fight an actual chemical imbalance of my body. So it was kind of like a double whammy trying to fight those thoughts. And the only thing that kept me going was there was a trail in DC, and I'd just go walk it. And I wouldn't speak to anyone. I wouldn't say anything. I would just go walk it, and I'd just breathe. And when they started leveling out, and I didn't take that massive amount of that testosterone, I was able to actually feel some of the things that would make me angry, but it wasn't in the present moment. It was something that happened a while ago. And then when something else would happen, I just cover it up. I cover up with that anger, cover up with that aggression, cover up with basically toxic masculinity. I wasn't mean to anyone. It was mostly internal, how I would subjectively view my story and how I would project it towards others. But once it started kind of leveling out, I had the ability to tap into the feminine nature because, like I said, my mother's help. She really was my rock at that time and kind of gave me a different perspective to look into things that I didn't think existed. I thought they were all bogus baloney. But then I decided that there's actually a lot of truth to it. Because a couple years earlier, what actually started this moment is I had drinking myself pretty much to death. And I had a near-death experience. And then meditating back on that near-death experience, I remember the interim between here and there. And that only came actually about a couple months ago, the full story of that experience. And it literally painted the way of what happened then till now. And I had a deeper understanding of the whole transition that was occurring. And it was quite incredible.
Now, you actually have a very different, let's say, understanding of that particular time when people are experiencing near-death experiences and they go towards the light. Do you want to talk about, let the audience know your perspective on that and why you don't see that as a good thing?
Yeah. So when I went through that, I basically drank a bunch of alcohol and I hurt myself and I lost a lot of blood. And then I kind of wrestled around with some cops and they gave me narcotics. So I had a whole bunch of stuff going on. The universe wanted me to go a certain way and I still wasn't listening. But in that time, or in that space, I would say, I remember not feeling my body, but being able to hear what is around my body. But I was looking at my body. And a lot of people talk about going to this light, but in my experience, there wasn't a light. You're kind of in the void, what I would say, which is creation energy. You're in absolute potential. And I always kind of had like a connection to the stars. Something bad would happen and I'd scream out the stars like, God, what's going on? You know, not knowing that was my connection to who I visited on this side. Now, when I was in that space, I said, where's my family? And then these beings started to appear. There wasn't necessarily fear, but there was a lot of confusion because they weren't human. They're not all human. Some were human, but they weren't anyone that I ever seen before. But then when they started to communicate, not through words, but through what I call like a tunnel, and they hit certain spots which are related to chakras because they're your guiding forces that lead you through those chakras. They told me, you know, basically, are you done? And I asked the question, what do you mean? It's like, well, you came here for a reason. Are you done? And when I did some research that these near-death experiences are kind of your way out of the matrix without committing suicide. It's like, are you okay? Do you need to come home? Well, go ahead.
No, I'm like, wow, I haven't heard that before.
Well, that's why the near-life death experiences, when you come back there's a change that happens. It happens with everybody that's had a near-death experience. And what that changes is you bring a little bit of that piece with you from that different realm, but then you also kind of get to get a clean slate when it comes to those contracts. It's almost like a bankruptcy of the astral world, if you want to put it that way. And so when I asked, well, where's this light? And what they replied to me is, the light can't get you. And then that was the end of that memory.
Wow.
Through my research and wondering what this light is, I've gone to this meditation. Everyone talks about they're seeing this light, and I've gone towards the meditation, towards that light, but the light isn't all that benevolent. It's more of certain ET groups that have used machinery to produce energy to manipulate reality. And what they do is they'll take your soul, because we're programmed to go to the light. That's actually a reincarnation device. It forcefully removes all your memories of your entire existence and puts you back at square one. And it's a matrix that goes around this thing. And that's why every religion that's in any sort of control, they say, go to the light, go to the divine light, and hear gods and all that kind of stuff. It's actually featured on a Star Trek episode about this same topic too. So there's a little bit of disclosure in the sci-fi world. But that's my experience.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So for a lot of that's an interesting concept. And I remember when we were talking about this in Sedona, I really resonated with that. And I had never heard it before, but it made so much sense that there would be that, that what is it called? The wheel of reincarnation, that system to put you right back in and not have you progress any further. Because obviously more time we have here, the more ability we have to wake up, get stronger in our power, our light, and do more work here. You had a lot of ET contact as a kid. So when you saw these beings on the near-death experience, were some of them the same as what you saw as a kid? So
as a kid, those experiences were quite violent, actually, because I was kind of being traumatized by a stepfather at the time. And moving to what I know now, the energy of one of the beings was the same. And I call him my main guide. And what he did when I was a kid is he was kind of making himself aware that, hey, I'm here. We're here with you. But at that time, because of just all the stuff that was happening, it had a negative feeling behind it. It had a more fearful interpretation in my child's mind. I'm 6 years old. And some not nice things are happening to me. And so when I see these beings, I was terrified. But the more terrifying thing was actually what happened when I was sleeping. So when I'd go to sleep, what I would feel or what I would experience is I would be inside what I viewed as my body, but I'd be going down a tunnel. And you can think of the tunnel very similar to like slime or like slugs, and the sound of static. Shh. And that's the whole dream. No one can hear me scream. No one can hear me do anything. And then every once in a while, I would feel a pull on the back of my head, a pull. And every time I kind of resisted fighting that pull, it's almost as if I was being pulled out, but like me, not my body, me being pulled out of my body. And then I'd wake up and there's those beings. And that happened for about 3 years straight. It terrified me. So I closed off anything related to anything that's not physically tangible with my senses, because it scared the hell out of me.
Yeah, no, naturally. Now, you said something there really interesting because, this is something we talked about up in Sedona, and Trish is in the live chat. Hey, Trish. We have this tendency as humans to project our own fear onto things. And so because you were in such a traumatized state as a child with your stepdad, you were projecting this fear onto the beings that weren't actually there to harm you.
Yeah, not at all. Mm-mm.
So who were they?
Well, upon later discovery, this is about 2 years that I decided to meditate back on that, because I was 25 years old last time I talked about it, and it'd bring me to tears because it was frightening. What I realized is when I went back to, it's kind of like a self-regression. Went back to that moment, but I went back as who I am now. And I looked at these beings, and I was aware that who I was then was projecting something at them. And it was more of a fearful state. But one of the reasons why they were just sitting there staring at me is because they communicate from the throat up. So I couldn't feel any of their love coming from the heart chakra or any other sort of emotions. So when you speak to these beings, a lot of people say like, oh, they don't have emotions. They do. It's a higher form of emotion. It's mainly projected through the throat or the higher mental functions of these emotions. And I got to look at these beings and fully objectively observe them, but then observe that my fear was coming from me. And the only thing that they wanted to do was just know that they're present. And then I remember one of them went like this. And I was like, whoa. And I got jolted back and I was like, okay, that's wild. What's going on here? And so I kind of kept going into that. But it's interesting because that is a very key thing for my experience. And they're only giving it to me in doses. It's almost like if I hit a certain progression within my healing now, I go back into that moment, then I get a little more of a breadcrumb. And I get to take that back with me. It's quite amazing how the now moment you have access to everything with the right thought on how to get there.
Mm-hmm. Well, you came across a lot of wisdom through this. What I love about you, Mason, is that you've really self-taught yourself through going to the very depths of despair and just losing it all, but then being forced to really find it all. And you found it through the orchestration of nature and your own ability to tune in. One of the wisdoms that you were talking about that I think is important for a lot of people to hear, because one of the things that happens, and this happened to me through my further awakening, was I went through a phase where I felt like I was being psychically attacked by negative entities. And it's not that I wasn't, I was, however, I always believed that these were entities outside of me, like they were separate from me. And the reality is what a lot of us don't understand until we later go deeper into this wisdom is that most negative entities are self-created. Do you want to expand upon that for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what we mean by, I guess you could say, self-created is a lot of times when these fear manifest into our sphere, right? We think of it as something external because that thought came in. So it has to be external. Well, what's actually going on is the communication between our subconscious mind, which is our feminine mind, but then our conscious understanding of those triggers. So if we experience a psychic attack, the first thing in human nature is to blame someone else. But when we blame someone else, we're actually giving them our power and then manifesting our internal, deeper fears as to something externally messing with us. And then we'll sit there and be like, oh, my tech's not working, or this bad omen's coming. But we forget that we're literally creating our reality with our thought systems. And if these things are being presented to you in a form of an unpleasant thought or going back to a reoccurring scenario where you were afraid, that is that shadow aspect of yourself or shadow being or whatever label you want to put onto it. It's asking for healing. It's because it knows at the current level you have the information to set it free. And that's all it's asking for. When it is coming into our field and it's making itself aware, it's asking to be let go. And then when you let go and you face those fears, that's where these extra abilities come from. It's like you level up yourself by fighting your own fears. And for 3 years in DC, I'm surrounded by all these occultic members flashing their rings, driving past people with these signs, learning about what these people are doing and going, oh my gosh, I almost got recruited into some sort of satanic thing. It's terrifying. But the reason why we're light bringers and carriers of light is because we have to shine it on those. And a lot of people in this community, when we collectively get together to do our own shadow work, we're exposing the shadow within us, and then it manifests as exposing the shadow within the world. Because we're all just little pieces of neurons on this planet that Mother Earth is trying to know herself with. So if we have little facets of with us, buried so deep down inside our subconscious mind, you truly don't get to see the opposite side of duality on what that experience actually has to teach you. And it takes a lot of willpower or solar energy, the sun, to face those fears. And the rewards are profound. You're able to find more peace and tranquility within your own thoughts, and then notice those in others to then give you your experience, how to get through with whatever they're experiencing. And then the biggest thing I could say is, if you think someone's hexing you, if you think someone's trying to harm you, well, take a second and really feel into those thoughts. A lot of us try to push them away. Well, what we resist persists, mm-hmm. right? So if you're trying to add the opposite energy to something that's trying to come at you, it's trying to come at you because it's one of your missions to then be upgraded and then get those true full understandings, get rid of all those misconceptions or false timelines or ego programs that we tell ourselves, which are usually false.
Yeah. And it's so true. Oftentimes when we come up against this stuff, it's because we're ready for it. And oftentimes we shy away from it because, well, understandably so. It's like I talk about this a lot on the channel, in video games, when you're about to go to the next level, you face a really big monster at the end, yep. And so, of course, this is kind of blocking your entryway into that timeline that supports your higher frequencies and higher set of beliefs that are aligned more with light. So it's natural in a way. Okay, that in itself is scary for some of us, because what happens is we become so much more powerful and we become scared of our own power. Mm-hmm. Let's go into this, because let's talk about opening portals and how these entities work. Because when you and I were chatting, you were talking about putting power into things outside of us and how we lose our power. And I know you mentioned this earlier, but could you kind of just let the audience know exactly what you went through and what you did, how you talked yourself out of it or felt yourself out of it, to realize that how you were opening portals as well to allow this in?
Yeah. So we have to understand the energy body. And that's something I didn't know about at all. Whenever you're in a moment of fear or you're in a moment of something that's unpleasant, you'll feel like a vortex coming towards you. If you think about the last time you were afraid of something, you definitely feel something's being pulled from you. And when we experience those things, I call it like the vampire in the room. If you remember like old vampire movies, they'd have to knock on the door. Can I come in? Right? Yeah. So we have this egg-shaped sphere around us. And when there's thought forms kind of floating around, and if they pique something that we already believe to be true about ourselves, and we let it in and it manifests as fear, you're opening the door to your temple for these beings to then use you. And that's where the Archon energy comes in. Because when you experience trauma, you have aspects of your soul that become fragmented. They kind of chip off a little bit. But what happens is, in that chip, something is placed in there. So it's like a hole. So depending on where energetically it's traumatized you, it's an energy that's an opposite of polarity as source energy that has the ability to manifest a portal to open up these things to actually have them attack you. And we'll do something very simple for like jealousy, for example, right? If you've ever been cheated on, that's going to have multiple holes within your auric field or within your chakras. One would be your heart, because you trusted the person to not do that. Another one would be a sexual center, and then also your will center, because you didn't believe it to be true. But then the biggest one is this one, your pineal gland. It creates these barriers that are kind of, your perspective becomes separated to truth. And so when you experience these things again, those old triggers will then open up and activate those portals. And if you didn't have healing, you automatically have a portal open up for Archon energy to then manifest more. And if you keep believing into that old narrative of I've been cheated on, I'll continue to be cheated on, you're actually giving it energy to help it manifest into a bigger field around you. And you'll know that when you like think of a thought and then you keep running with that train, even though that's something you don't want, you're actually increasing your own creative ability towards that thought, and they're draining it from you. And they're literally using your own power and your own mind and all your energy centers to make you believe into that illusion. And a lot of times has nothing to do with anything real. And one of the good things is to take an objective approach to all type of healing, because when you're objectively looking at something, you're taking yourself away from the situation to view as a pure observer, to understand your story. And then when you understand your story, you can find truth within it. And that's how you can integrate your healing, because you're looking at it at a higher perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say becoming the witness is so important. And it was a huge part of my journey of understanding how much shadow work there was to do. And of course, you don't really see it when you're in yourself, when you're immersed in it. You have to really become the witness without judgment. I think that's the key, because a lot of us will tend to go into judgment of it, which keeps us stuck in the thing.
In the illusion, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, so these portals exist everywhere, especially for people that have traumatic experiences. They're actually part of you. These beings are interdimensional, so they can actually phase in this energy. I'm not talking about just in this reality, this energetic reality as a part of you. They can go within your heart chakra and then disappear, but they're still there until you let them go of that entire belief system that made you originally think or feel that way about yourself.
When you say they disappear, do you mean they're just dormant?
I guess you can look at it that way. So in a very bigger scale of how all this works, black holes are actually a space where these beings would exist, or where you can call demons or anything like that. They are void of light, but it's opposite of light. And so we know at the smallest molecular level, the atom can become a black hole. You just invert it. So at any moment's time, they can pop in and pop out, which is different than interdimensional, because interdimensional is just phasing into your vibration. This is literally popping in and out of existence. That's why it has the ability to stay at an energetic level, imprinted literally as a part of your DNA. It's in the crystalline code because you allowed it to be there, because we're here to experience duality.
Yeah.
But once you find it, be aware of it, understand that it's there and it doesn't belong there. And that's how you purge. And fasting is one of the number one ways to get those exposed, because you're no longer distracting yourself with material.
Yeah, I was going to say like addictions, which we all have addictions.
Yeah.
I was just talking about this on the Protect the Vote yesterday, our addictions to social media and our digital devices, needing to constantly get those dopamine hits to feel good, that when you start to fast and go on like quote unquote detox, you start to see a lot of stuff come up that you've been suppressing through. Yeah. And it happened to me back in April, where first day I thought it was bliss. I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And then the second day I started to get irritated. I was angry. And I'm like, where is this coming from? What is this emotion? And it made me realize how much the Matrix is designed to keep us from healing and closing these portals, which are our shadow work.
Oh, did you freeze?
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah. So it's very interesting. So was there one specific thing that you could talk about that you did that kind of stands out in your mind on healing and closing those portals? Yeah.
So in our everyday life, everything's kind of busy. You're either distracting yourself with social media, you're distracting yourself with television, video games, all these external type of things. Honestly, the way it helped me, now I had all day just because of my I guess trajectory of how I were to get here. But if you could dedicate time within the day to be absolutely alone in nature, somewhere quiet, in a bath, it doesn't matter, or in a shower possibly. You just need to be there and feel yourself. How does it feel? Do I feel agitation? And if you do, try to identify where that agitation is coming from. It's usually associated with somewhere in the body. And the more and more you can do that consistently, the more that agitation will turn from a physical disturbance to an energetic understanding of where it comes from. And by being and sitting in that silence, you're able to talk to your subtle body and talk to, well, where is it? It's in my chest. Oh, then you can kind of go through your timeline of all the scenarios where you were hurt in your heart. And by identifying each one of those, which one has the biggest ripple within your energetic timeline? And then you can do that observation through objective identification of what it is. It sounds very complex, but it's not. I actually do want to create videos on how to do this. And it can be done all with yourself. And if you have communications with your guides, you can be the objective observer and they can show you where it's at. They can help you pull that from you. They can help you kind of get that angle to a different version of the story that you're denying yourself to understand, where the true picture is, revealed to you. And some people go through some of the most traumatic things, but at a certain level, it's our soul's mission and trajectory to understand these traumas because we don't ever want them to happen again. Mm-hmm. That's why the world is collectively going through this purge, because we're getting all the data, we're getting all the experiences, we're integrating them as a collective team, and we're going, okay, for the next experiment, this is not okay. And because we do the healing to get through that, that is how we win. We show the divine light through the darkest of places. Yeah,
the Matrix preys and depends on our trauma existing. Mm-hmm. So the more that we go into our own personal healing, the more we remove that control and power from the Matrix. It's very simple, but it's, of course, going into healing is very painful initially, mm-hmm. and can be very scary depending on the trauma that you're going in to heal. But I firmly believe that if something's coming up, you're already equipped to go into it.
Absolutely. The people that go through the most struggle, it just means you have more experience in those events. And your experience is needed because you've already been through it. And we need to remember that you're through it. So that way you can actually upload a template of how to heal. When people do their own healing and they successfully complete it, you're uploading a script, kind of, so to speak, in the collective for someone else going through a similar vibrational experience as you, that then they can retrieve to integrate to their self to find their healing. Mm-hmm. That's how we're collectively creating this experience.
Now, before we go in, because I really want to go into the healing of the masculine energy, because I feel like that is so important and it's not talked about enough. And of course, having a man on the show who can share how important that was to like your own journey. Before we go into that, just really quickly, you mentioned to me since we're just coming off of Halloween, and you were mentioning to me the origins of Halloween, and I'm also curious. DC to me is like is one of the biggest hearts of, when it comes to this particular country, of demon type energies. Did you actually see shadows, beings, and demons through the people like in DC when you were there?
Yes. I've come face to face with what I would call empty seaters. Those are people whose consciousness have been taken from the divine spark and something's been put in there. I used to work at a bar in DC, not going to name it, but it was an all-male nude bar. And I was a bartender because that's the only thing that I could find to supply a means of income. And some of the people there, you look at them and just some of the requests they'd have towards you, they're just disgusting. They're ridiculous. And then if you try to look into their eyes, you don't see anything. There's a haze over there. There's no energy coming from their body. There's nothing besides what can they take from you? Because when someone asks you to do something against your own truth, right, or what you would call disgusting or unwanted attention, that is an entity trying to take something from you because it satisfies the urge of them not being able to create whatever's in them. And there's a lot of people there that may not be aware of some of their energy attachments, but it's due to the field that they're working in. So when you're working in these intelligences and you're working for certain parties that have a hidden agenda, you automatically can tell that there's going to be a being influencing this person's decisions, especially if they have power behind them. Because a lot of the things that they're doing, and we're witnessing now in mainstream media, are absolutely disgusting. They're crimes against humanity, some of the most horrific mutilation type things you can do to another being. And you will see this depending on what level they're functioning at. Some people most people are mainly stuck in the lower three centers. And when you're stuck in the lower three centers, you'll have smaller beings. But when you're activated to higher knowledge, like some of these occult members, where these are activated and they are full knowing what they're doing in accordance to karma, that's when you actually see the beings next to them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're much bigger experience because they're in agreement with these beings. The lower level people just have them around and they're influencing. The higher people, they're like buddies with these things. They trade off one another. They exchange energies. They allow one to have control over their physical vessel. They're in a complete contractual agreement with some of these things. And at first, when my pineal gland started to open up, I started developing a tumor here because I just wasn't believing what I was seeing. I thought I was going crazy. I was like, how is this shadowy figure? Literally, it looked like he was kissing this person's ear and then he would speak something disgusting. It's like, this is incredible. Like, I'm going crazy. I know I am. Whatever, I'm homeless. So it was kind of, it was like, I understand. I'm going crazy. Looney bins next.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
wow.
It's quite wild.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So you would literally see the mechanics of the demon's work literally through your pineal gland activated. That's so interesting that you could see this entity almost kissing the person and then them saying something really nasty.
Well, that's how they hook you, though. They hook you through your fear center, which is your root. But in order to get you to express their will, they tap into your sexual center, your creative center.
Yeah.
And then in this environment that I was at, it's a very hypersexual place with all sorts of stuff going on. That's what it manifested into my understanding. And sometimes I'd be like, I was drunk and I'd be like, dude, you got something on your shoulder. And they'd be like, yeah, I know. And they are totally aware of it. Like, these people, they don't joke around. They know what they're getting into.
Wow.
A lot of them, though, they don't. But the higher level people, the people that do these rituals and stuff like that, they're aware. They know exactly. That's why they have multiple personalities. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's just, it's interesting. You know, I haven't ever seen that happen, but I'm kind of grateful I haven't, because I have a very, I just don't have a good, what's it called, stomach for that kind of stuff, which I think I've purposely put into my my whole system to help stay away from it. I really believe that was part of it, so that I wouldn't ever watch scary movies, that I wouldn't ever be around that, just to kind of stay away from it. But let's get into this harmonizing of the masculine and feminine energies, and we'll kind of talk a little bit more on the masculine aspect. For you, what needed the most healing and attention for you?
Well, actually, to heal the feminine, you have to heal to heal the masculine, you have to heal the feminine.
Yes.
And in my experience, and I may not be this way for everybody, but in order to tap into my masculine, my feminine had to be healed. I had to be aware of the subtle energies. I had to be aware of the innate nature of just connectedness between people, between plants, between animals, in order to even feel what it's like to be a masculine. Because a masculine has a lot to do with like self-confidence. Well, if I don't have self-confidence, then you can already be assured that my feminine aspect has no confidence, none, because it's non-existent within the masculine polarity. And so I really kind of dabbled into the Taoist tradition of the yin and yang. And I didn't really coin the term masculine feminine until a little bit later, but I did understand that there was like a dark side and a light side of it, but I needed to be in balance. And so going through my experiences and having, sexual traumas as a child, having physical traumas, there's a lot of identities as my younger child of not knowing what it was to stand in either one of them. We all have both, but if you don't have a good instruction of like, well, what's a baseline? Where do you start? Like, how do you know what to do? And you just have to understand that when you go through experiences with people and people share certain energies with you, well, how are you responding to it? Are you responding to it aggressively? Are you being reflective, or are you being receptive? And just understanding your day-to-day encounters with everybody, doesn't matter who they are, can kind of give you a judge or a baseline of where you're at energetically, masculine or feminine. A lot of people go by the term that everyone is your mirror. Well, if everyone is my mirror, that means everyone is my tool to heal myself. And so by doing that, you're just judging your conversations, not judging. You're gauging your conversations between people to see, well, how are they responding? And depending on their responses, is it triggering me in a certain way? And so a masculine trait would be the ability to be objectively thinking. Can I remove myself from the situation, or is this situation personally attacking me? That would be out of balance in a masculine. That's why we have all these wars. Oh, they're personally attacking my agenda. No. You'll understand that war and peace are the same slide of duality, but they will only exist as if you see them separate. If you see in the neutral spot war and peace, it's just one of the same thing. It's just different by degree. You want peace, but you fight it with war. You have war, but you're trying to fight it with peace. It doesn't work that way. And so another trait would be self-discipline, routine. The masculine energy likes to have an objective that it can go towards in a kind of like a numerologically laid out plan, right? Like, okay, 7 o'clock, I make my bed. In the military, that kind of was a decent trait for me because they gave me that routine. It's a very masculine trait. It's like, do this now. On the other side, the flip side, the feminine side, it's spontaneous. It's what do I feel right in this moment? So it's a good necessary balance. Yeah, you can have routine, but be spontaneous. But that's where the happy median is. Another masculine trait, what I would call masculine, is setting boundaries. But that's for both. Yes. Speaking your truth. What is too far? If it's too far, and for me being a masculine, you don't overstep boundaries either. You should be aware of these boundaries and respect the boundaries of others. And a lot of people don't have their voice to even tell you what those boundaries are. And so it comes to the person to really feel into the moment, feel into the mood. Well, what are some potential boundaries if you were me? You're looking at the person throughout, like, what is that saying? Step in their shoes, something like that. Willpower. So we know that the sun is a masculine trait, but the sun also denotes willpower. If I have no willpower to say, I'm not going to eat this donut, I can't create a structured routine to give me more self-confidence because I don't want to eat all those donuts, So they kind of all go into each other. But what really started healing, I would say, my masculine energy is understanding that everything that happened to me is what made me appreciate being a protector. If I think of a masculine energy as an animal, I think of a lion. Mm-hmm. One, because the female lions are total badasses. And two, because the male lion, the mane reminds me of a sun. It reminds me of that the majesty, that powerful presence. And then it complements the female energy so well because it has that ferocity, has that night stalker. The moon energy is totally with the lioness. And connecting to the warrior within, right? So my belief system, it might be different than others. I think men are only on this planet because they're here to protect women, but originally it was all women. And I'm a firm believer of that because I think that there was certain beings that came here to infiltrate to where the women needed to change their genetic code to produce men to protect them. But what happened is these men became corrupted and they denied the feminine essence and the connection to the divine, whether it be witches, shamans, all these type of feminine traits, that men began to become scared of the women that created them. And it's just, to me, it's like, well, why? We're here on this earth because women have such a beautiful power and they're connected to all these things. The man is supposed to be there to be the support, but then also to be that building block to help her manifest her desires, which is together their desires. And that warrior within it's a very powerful statement when you understand that I fight for what is right in my heart, not for what is right for everybody else or for societal norms. It's what's right for me, and how can I lead that through the other disciplines of what it means to be a masculine.
Well, just even when you say that, fighting for what's right for you, you mentioned how you use your intelligence skills to strengthen your discernment. And discernment is, I think, one of the most essential, skills to have, especially at this time, with there being so much disinfo, misinfo coming out, and in any community, even the spiritual community, right? How have you used what kind of skills have you used to help sharpen your discernment that some of us wouldn't have because we haven't been where you have?
Yeah. So when people come out with topics like in the spiritual community and they come out with new information, everybody wants the new information because they're like, oh, it's one step closer to the whole picture. Well, here's the problem. Nobody else can tell you your picture. Nobody else can convince you what your truth is. And the only way to discern some of these things is to really go inside and be like, how do I feel about it? It's the feeling is where the power is. The knowing, your ego takes care of that usually. It'll make you believe into something false. But when something comes out in the community or there's a new hypothesis of what's going on, you have to think in two spaces. Logically, does it make sense? And then creatively, in touch with the universe, is it possible? So if something is logically possible, then you can kind of find that there's truth to it. And then you just find what a center point is. But if something is so far-fetched in polarity, way too far onto one side, to where logically it's not possible, then there's another thing and you can't find where those two connect because they're too dissociative of another. But really, it's the intuition that can tell you the truth. And there's a lot of ways to kind of tune into that intuition. Some people use pendulums. Some people will use a crystal and be like, okay, I program you to get warm when something is yes, or sometimes they can kind of shock you. Like I've done that before. You ever touch the crystal and like zap you?
Mm-mm.
No?
No.
Oh yeah. Get a quartz crystal. So they're piezoelectric. If you compress them, usually you have to tap it, but they can give you an electrical signal if it's right or not. They're pretty impressive. But when it comes to like, it really depends on what you're asking for discernment. Are you talking about like tech? Are you talking about spiritual understandings?
Anything, because I think in general, just discernment, it's, one of the things that I've realized is the necessity of having the balance of the feminine and masculine energies, because I do want to listen to my intuition, but I also want to apply logic because, as you were saying, like having those two to connect somewhere is very important. You can't have one without the other. And sometimes I find in the spiritual community, it's heavily weighted towards just the intuitive aspect and just saying to hell with like the logic, like it could be possible. And I mean, there's nothing, it's not that you can't explore the possibility, but to believe something is finite truth is infinite truth, can be detrimental because, like you said, like when you were talking about, certain energy centers making portals, like in the heart, if you're cheated on, or, like things like this. Yeah. So if you, like, for instance, if you get betrayed, if you feel betrayed because you thought something was a truth and then you find out it wasn't, that can really deeply hurt you and definitely open like a wound.
But it also provides healing. So anytime you're triggered by something, and it doesn't matter what it is, it could be something as simple as someone being like, I don't like the color on your shirt, it doesn't matter. If it's triggering you, that means there's more information that you're not aware of yet. And it's a deeper understanding you can actually reach by looking into it. So if someone provides information and then it comes out to not be truth and you got triggered, well, why did you hold all your belief into that idea? And who was it that said the idea? Do they have their own healing? If you can recognize the material that you're ingesting, is it coming from someone in a neutral stance, or are they polarized somewhere along the scale? And before you make your assessment, you want to know, like, how far are they on their journey? Does it feel good when they're saying things? If they're saying and projecting with their throat chakra things of fear or things of, any sort of feeling other than ease, you can kind of gauge where they're at on their own journey. The more chaotic their message and saying, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world, we got to do all this healing, you can kind of just be like, okay, I will take your information as your truth, but until I find it, this is the important part, until I find a synchronicity within my reality that confirms it, it's just hearsay. Your biggest tool is your ability to communicate to the universe, to give you synchronicities, to provide evidence based off your reality. And that's kind of difficult for some people to understand. So if you have some information that you're given, ask your guides, ask your universe, give me an example of the validity of this situation. And it will be something as simple as someone else will bring it up in conversation, or you will see a sign with one of the words of what you're asking for. You have to find the valid experiences through your waking life, not trying to go and look for them, but to have them naturally be drawn to you to find your truth.
That's a lot of wisdom you just dropped there.
No,
I think that was really great. And I think it's, that idea of how do you discover what is true for you? Just because someone else said it doesn't necessarily mean it is. But then I also like to bring in that idea of, this idea that we're programmed through the matrix, that in order for you to believe it, you need to see it. And I think it's important to be open to a lot of possibilities, unless, of course, they're just logically, they just don't make any sense, like flat Earth.
yeah. I've seen imagery. It's not flat. Let's just say that.
Oh my gosh, that was funny in the group chat yesterday. So, but I think it's important though to be, when you're not really sure, just to stay open, and it's okay if you don't know the answer yet. And I think sometimes as a human race, we tend to need to have the answer immediately, which means we have to know the truth immediately, and that's sometimes where we pigeonhole ourselves.
Yeah. Patience.
Yeah.
That is the one word that my guides were telling me for like 3 years. And I was like, what does this mean? It's been 3 years. Well, obviously you haven't learned it yet. Right. Yeah.
Oh, that's been one of my nemesis, my arch nemesis was patience. It's been a very interesting journey. And now that I've been on almost a 3-year journey with it myself, it's interesting that 3 years for you. I'm starting to understand it now. And I'm starting to see the benefit and the beauty behind it.
It's letting things come to you as they are needed, like a divine orchestra. Before, we want to force things, get those immediate reactions, get those things now. Well, there's a lot of healing you have to do to become a vibrational match to it. And that's why if people are learning things, and if it's not coming to your flow through synchronicity, don't even worry about it. It's not meant for you at this time, or it might not even be true.
Yeah.
So let your connection to the universe show you the answers. You don't have to see them, because you could see them, feel them, be them, or hear them. There's so many different ways to get these synchronicities. It could be a song. It could be something another person says to you. It's what a stranger could be talking about in a different conversation. Just be aware of all the things around you, and it will tell you your truth, because you're innately connected to everything in existence.
Yeah. And thank you, Sutterbug, for the super chat. He says, thanks for bringing Mason to the show tonight. I like this guy.
Thank you.
Before we close out, considering the times that we're in right now and everything that's kind of going on in our planet, and do you kind of have a message for everyone, that, like any kind of wisdom that you think is important for them to hear? Or maybe take in, to let it percolate within them, that you'd like to share at this time?
Yeah, and it's been something I've been kind of focused on a little more recently. I'm just going to seed this idea into our heads, into our hearts as well. When you're talking to another person, it is an aspect of you. So whether they disagree with your beliefs, whether they trigger you, whether they're a bad person, whatever it is that you're subjectively thinking about them, understand that they have a purpose. And their purpose is to find out the differences in the things you chose not to experience in this life. And if we can keep looking at each other as another version of ourselves created by the same person that created you, we can get through the division. And then you're actually able to connect to people on a more, a higher vibratory exchange of energy, because the judgment's gone out the window. When we realize that when we judge other people, we're judging ourselves and a facet of an experience that we're not choosing to take. So when they say in the Bible, I'm not trying to quote the Bible, but be good to your neighbor. That's because your neighbor is a different version of you in this temporal reality. And I think if everyone can kind of just at least be aware of that and integrate that next time they speak to people, just because you have differences doesn't mean we're all that different. We're just trying to get to the same end result, which is happiness. And we can do that by experiencing and exchanging with each other in a higher form of communication.
Well said. Very beautiful and very timely. Very, very timely. I think it's really important that we all understand that, because the division is definitely planned on purpose for that. So, what just happened there? So, Mason, where can people find you if they'd like to get in touch with you?
I am Mason PNW11 on Instagram and Mason Feary on Facebook so far. I do plan on trying to produce a little more of these things when it comes to different healing modalities, different things that I've experienced and learned in order to kind of open up all these light workers, because pretty soon the ones that are watching your channel, you and I, we're going to be stepping up into a leadership role because collectively, now that we're purging, we need to integrate what we're learning, and that's going to be global. And so since we are the way showers of doing our own healing, the world is going to need us very soon.
Indeed. And we've got to tap into everything we have. Well, thanks so much, Mason, for coming on the show. Such a pleasure to have you on. And when you start getting your videos up, we'll have you back on so everyone can find you and start listening to all of your wisdom, because I do think you have a lot of wisdom that you've gained through a very difficult process that most people shy away from. So a lot of people could benefit from what you have to share. And thank you to the audience for being here, guys. I love you so much. Have a wonderful evening. Sleep well, and know that whatever happens tomorrow, we've got this. It's okay. Life goes on. The world will keep going, and we'll find a way to make everything right and balanced in this world one way or the other. Thank you, David, for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Guys, I love you so much. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll be back with you guys next